This is the second to the last episode before the finale. Don't forget to go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@FightTheFearPodcast. And if you want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/FightTheFearPodcast, where you'll get bonus episodes, unedited footage, edited footage, funny footage, crazy footage, extra bonus episodes, all kinds of good stuff.
Do it now.
Do it. Let's see. What do I got here? All right. So this will be the final Indiana-based serial killer. And I did look through. There's a bigger list. There's more people to talk about. We can come back around to this at some point. There's a lot more. But this guy was all over this state. When I read through, I just kind of skimmed through. I didn't want to catch any of the heavy details. I wanted to be, because I want to be shocked by some of it, you know?
Right.
Surprised, and we can unfold it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I started seeing so many city names. I was like, okay, he's definitely an Indiana boy. That's what we were trying to do, you know?
Right. Bring it back home.
Yeah. This one's Larry William Eyler. December 21st, 1952. Died on March 6, 1994.
Okay.
An American serial killer who is believed to have murdered a minimum of 21 teenage boys and young men in a series of killings committed in the Midwest between 1982 and 1984.
In 2 years?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Wow.
But let me...
And that, that was our teenage years right there. The beginning of them.
Yeah. It's...
They're our preteen years, but still.
Let me take a minute just to say...
Hello, motherfucker.
And
cheers.
Say cheers. I was trying to see, though. What do I have here? These guys get caught, and then, they're like...
It just isn't fair.
But you got to deal with it. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's a prolific killer, as they say.
Quick,
20
man.
In 2 years.
Yeah, quick. Let's get into this. He was convicted and sentenced to death by lethal injection for the 1984 kidnapping and murder of 16-year-old Daniel Bridges. He later voluntarily confessed to the 1982 murder of 23-year-old Stephen Agan, offering to also confess to his culpability in 20 further unsolved homicides if the state of Illinois would commute his sentence to life imprisonment without parole. So they were working on a deal, and that's what we said before. Like, a lot of times, a lot of these guys will have several more that you didn't know about until you got caught.
Mm-hmm.
Eyler died of AIDS-related complications in 1984 while incarcerated on death row. Shortly before his death, he confessed to the murders of 20 further young men and boys to his defense attorney, Kathleen Zellner. Although he denied being physically responsible for the actual murder of Bridges, who he was sentenced to death for, which he insisted had been committed by an alleged accomplice in 5 of his homicides, Robert David Little. With her client's consent, Zellner posthumously released Eyler's confession following the formal announcement of his death. Eyler was known as the interstate killer and the highway killer due to the fact many of his confirmed and alleged victims were discovered across several Midwestern states in locations close to or accessible via the interstate highway system. So before I go into that, let's look at this a little deeper here. So we got a mugshot of him. Here, take a look. Does he look like the type?
Sure does.
After you know it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's tough sometimes when you see somebody and you go, I just don't see it. And then you hear what they did and you go, holy crap, they fooled me.
Right. And how many people do you see every day that look like that?
Yeah.
And you never know.
Yeah.
Never
Average Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Born Larry William Eyler, December 21st, 1952, in Crawfordsville, Indiana. Died March 6, 1994, at age 41 at the Pontiac Correctional Center in Pontiac, Illinois. His other things that they thought he may be, or other names that they put on him, were the highway killer and the interstate killer. He was 6'1". His parents were George and Shirley. They said his motive was rage. That's odd.
Hmm.
So his
Kind of
convictions,
generic.
yeah, really generic. Like what? But maybe it's rage. We'll get into it. Maybe there's something that happened in his youth here.
Right.
But before we do, it says he was convicted in Illinois of murder, aggravated kidnapping, concealment of a homicidal death, and in Indiana, he was convicted of murder. His penalties were Illinois, he was sentenced to death on October 3rd, 1986, and in Indiana, they gave him 60 years in prison on December 28th, 1990. So that must have been when he cut this deal or whatever. 21 plus victims. I'm going to tap this little thing here to see, because it came out after his death. So he wasn't convicted for the 21.
Right. That's what he admitted to.
Right.
Or attributed to.
And the span of crimes were October 23rd, 1982 through August 19th of 1984. Illinois, Indiana, allegedly in Kentucky, and allegedly in Wisconsin. He was apprehended on August 21st, 1984. And he was imprisoned at the Pontiac Correctional Center. All right. Which is in
Illinois. Right.
Says early life. Born 1952 in Crawfordsville, the youngest of 4 children, born to George and Shirley. His dad died in 1971. His mom died in 2016, so she lived a long time after him.
Yeah.
His father was an alcoholic who was known to have physically and emotionally abused his wife and children. Eyler's parents divorced in mid-1955, which is doesn't seem like that would have been a good time for divorces back then. Like the 50s didn't seem like...
Yeah, very conservative back then. Yeah. A lot more.
I'm sure the numbers were a lot less than they are now. But, yeah. Eyler and his sister were regularly placed in the care of babysitters, foster families, or simply left in the care of 2 older siblings, the oldest of whom was age 10, as their mother struggled to financially support and provide adequate care for the 4 children, working 2 jobs as a waitress and in a factory on weekdays, and occasionally in a bar on the weekend. Nonetheless, when Eyler and his sister were in the care of foster families, their mother would frequently visit her 2 youngest children, and Eyler would claim these separations and reunions brought the family closer. In 1957, Eyler's mother remarried. This marriage lasted 1 year before the couple divorced. His mother married for a 3rd time in 1960. Although the couple divorced 4 years later, she married a 4th time in 1972. Eyler's father and his first 2 stepfathers drank heavily, and he and his siblings were subjected to frequent abuse. One of his stepfathers frequently held Eyler's head beneath scalding water as a form of discipline.
Ouch.
Eyler attended St. Joseph's School in Lebanon, Indiana. Although tall for his age and active in sporting activities, he was regularly targeted by bullies due to being from a poor family and his parents having divorced, frequently leading to his sister, Teresa, confronting her brother's tormentors. Eyler was viewed by teachers as a quiet yet likable pupil with very few friends. Due to his increasing stubbornness and erratic behavior, Eyler's mother placed him in a home for unruly boys in 1963. He found this experience emotionally devastating and within weeks had tearfully persuaded his mother to allow him to return home. Shortly thereafter, Eyler underwent psychological tests which revealed him to be of average intelligence, although suffering from severe insecurity and holding an extreme fear of separation and abandonment. Deducing these fears sourced from his home life, staff recommended Eyler be temporarily placed in a Catholic boys' home in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He remained at this residence for 6 months before he returned to the care of his mother. So I definitely could see where rage could start welling up there from someone being able to control you physically, emotionally, with his mom leaving all the time and not being around, his dad not being there in his life, seeing other kids making fun of him or whatever, because that's not the case. I mean, when I was a kid, my parents split up. I didn't suffer any bullying over it. I had 3 older brothers, but I do empathize the absence of the 2, whether, it's from divorce or later on my mother died, things like that. You had, when everybody's not there, it's just not right. There's something off.
The balance is off.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And he goes to the boys' school, and I can imagine the fresh meat, the new kid, whether it's sexual abuse or just violence against him, and
they're not even giving us details on any of that, and I'm sure.
Right. No, we can just imagine it's not a good place, and if he's begging to come home, he's not having a good time there.
When he reached puberty, Eyler discovered that he was homosexual. He was open about his sexuality, but only to his family. And although he struggled with deep-seated feelings of self-hatred regarding his sexual orientation.
There it is. That's seems to be a common thing.
Right. It's odd, and this one's an odd one because he was open about it to his family, whereas a lot of the guys were definitely closeted.
Right.
And had that feeling of aggression, regression, whatever you want to call it.
I'm going to live out this experience, but then I want to erase any memory of it,
right?
And you're part of it, so I have to kill you and get rid of you. Yep.
Where this one's a little different. Like he told his family,
right.
And he's got the support of his family, but I guess he's feeling this social pressure or whatever. It says that throughout high school, he occasionally dated girls, although none of these relationships became physical. Having been somewhat religious since childhood, Eyler did confide to some close acquaintances how he struggled to accept his sexuality. In part due to his lackadaisical attitude towards schooling, Eyler failed to graduate from high school, although he did later obtain a General Education Development Certificate, GED.
Right.
Shortly after leaving college, Eyler obtained employment as a private security guard in the Marion County General Hospital. He worked in this job for 6 months before losing the position and finding alternate work within a shoe store. While employed there, Eyler began familiarizing himself with Indianapolis's gay community, frequenting gay bars and frequently engaging in casual liaisons with men. Now, before I go any further, you know what's wild here?
Stop right there.
The I-70 killer was in that 4-block square in Indianapolis of gay bars.
Yeah.
And it was around this time, these years.
Wonder if they crossed paths
and didn't know it. And that's why this guy also got called the highway killer as well. Because remember I said there were several other people
right,
that they had thought. Wow.
You get confused and you call too many the highway killer. Like,
wow.
But yeah, that's very
interesting. They could have crossed paths for sure. And this guy wouldn't have. He did not meet the other guy's MO. Chosen victim because the type that he had was like the younger, boyish, effeminate guys that he knew he could overpower, whereas this guy was a bigger guy. That's why. I did not even think about them guys crossing paths. So while in the employment, and Eyler began familiarizing himself with the Indianapolis's gay community, frequenting the gay bars and frequently engaging in casual liaisons with men. Several of these individuals noted Eyler averted his eyes from his partner during intercourse while shouting profanities such as bitch and whore, leading many to believe Eyler was fantasizing his partner was female. Now, here's another one of these conditions. Was it Baumeister had the pee fetish?
Yep.
Okay, here's a new one. Paraphilia. It's a leather fetish.
Okay.
By the
bondage, maybe, or not even that far. It's just the leather, the fabric.
Let's find out. By the mid-'70s, Eyler was well known within the gay community of Indianapolis, particularly among those with a leather fetish. Several acquaintances within this community described him as a good-looking, laid-back guy and avid bodybuilder who was close to his mother and sister, although others who had engaged in sexual activity with him described him as an individual with a sadistic streak and violent temper, which would only surface within their sexual encounters, often involving Eyler extensively bludgeoning, then inflicting light knife wounds upon unwilling partners, particularly to their torsos. Man, this gets...
light knife wounds.
I'm going to lightly cut
just
you.
Merely scratches.
Call you a bitch. Eyler primarily worked as a house painter by this time. And although never having served in the military, he was fond of wearing Marine Corps T-shirts. He resided in a condominium in Terre Haute, Indiana, with a 38-year-old library science professor named Robert David Little, whom he had first met in 1974 while studying at Indiana State University. The relationship between the two men was platonic, with Eyler viewing Little as something of a father figure. Eyler and Little regularly socialized within Indianapolis's gay community, although Little, a socially awkward, taciturn, and unattractive individual, typically...
By whose standard?
Is a face made for radio. Typically struggled to form friendships or obtain sexual partners during these excursions, resulting in Eyler frequently bringing young men to Little's home to engage in sex with the two of them. So now we get to the first attempted murder. August 3rd, 1978, Eyler picked up a 19-year-old hitchhiker named Craig Long on 7th Street in Terre Haute. Shortly after Long entered the pickup truck, Eyler propositioned the youth, resulting in Long attempting to leave the vehicle. In response, Eyler pressed a knife against the youth's chest as Long stated, "I don't have any money." Eyler then drove towards a rural field stating, "It's not your money I want. I'm not after your money." He then ordered Long to undress before he handcuffed the youth, bound his ankles, and then ordered him to climb into the back of the pickup. I mean, geez, you're not giving the guy a lot of options if he's handcuffed and his feet are bound. Get in the back of the truck with it.
Right.
Need some help up, dude. When Long attempted to flee from the pickup, as Eyler undressed, Eyler chased after him as Long shouted, "You queer." In response, Eyler stabbed the youth once in the chest, penetrating his lung.
Ooh, bad spot.
Long slumped to the ground, feigning death. He later stumbled to a nearby house where the occupants summoned paramedics. Shortly thereafter, Eyler drove to the house as Long received first aid and offered the handcuff key to a sheriff's deputy, claiming he stabbed the young man accidentally. He was arrested and taken into custody. A search of the vehicle recovered a hunting knife, a metal-tipped whip, a butcher knife, and a further set of handcuffs, tear gas, and a sword.
It's quite the collection.
Damn, you got all that in the car?
He's got a sword.
Eyler was later charged with aggravated battery, to which he agreed to plead guilty. The judge set his bond at $10,000, which was raised by friends. He was released on bail until August 23rd. On this date, Eyler's lawyers offered Long a check from Little for $2,500 in return for his agreeing not to press charges. Long accepted the offer, and Eyler changed his plea to not guilty. As such, he was acquitted on November 13th, being fined only $43 in court costs. This was after this. So this was, what do we say, 78. So now we go to 1981. August of 81. Eyler formed a long-term relationship with a 20-year-old married man named John Dobrovolskis. Dobrovolskis lived with his wife, 2 children, and 3 foster children on North Greenview Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. Damn, he was 20. His wife, Sally, was tolerant of her husband's sexual orientation and of the fact her husband's lover often lodged with them on weekdays because he paid a third of the rent.
Well, he talks.
Apparently, right. So between 1982 and 1984, Eyler is known to have committed a minimum of 21 murders and 1 attempted murder. All his murders involved the restraining of his victim, and several victims were subjected to varying degrees of sadomasochism before being stabbed and or slashed to death, with the majority of the wounds being inflicted to the victim's chest and abdomen. His victims were typically typically plied with alcohol and sedatives before their restraint and murder. Several victims were disemboweled after death, and Eyler is known to have dismembered the bodies of 4 of his victims. His victims were typically discarded in fields close to major interstate highways, with their trousers and underwear frequently discovered around their knees or ankles, and their shirts and wallets missing from the crime scene. So I wonder if he was keeping trophies, maybe? Sometimes they'll keep the IDs as trophies.
Right.
A lot of that similarity was the guy in Florida who would pull the hearts out. And there's something there like you're not dead enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I got to be sure, so I'm going to take everything out. So
unlike last episode where we weren't sure if the guy was doing it as, because he enjoyed the act of killing, or it was more of he wanted to to have the sexual encounter, but then wanted to erase the thought of it and get rid of it. Sure. This guy, it sounds like he just enjoyed the killing aspect, because he had the sexual aspect free and clear with his married partner, and, well, not the sexual part with the teacher,
but he had a place to stay,
but the camaraderie
security
part,
and it was a
right?
father
so
figure.
This sounds like it's strictly he enjoyed the act of killing.
And it's also it's odd that he would they said he would like talk, and they thought he was talking to a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and he wouldn't look. So he's like, if you're imagining a woman, why aren't you with a woman? There's like a insecurity there or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Interesting.
December 19th, a 23-year-old named Stephen Egan was abducted in Terre Haute. His body was discovered in Woodlands, close to Indiana State Road 63, on December 28th. An examination of the outbuilding of an abandoned farm close to the crime scene revealed several traces of human flesh upon the walls in areas where plaster had been damaged, leading investigators to speculate Egan had been suspended against the walls of this property as his murderer had inflicted injuries upon his body. Noting the extensive mutilation upon Egan's abdomen, chest, and throat, the coroner who performed this autopsy referenced the tremendous rage Egan's killer had exhibited upon his victim in his autopsy report, adding a likelihood of there being more than one perpetrator in this murder. The FBI developed a psychological profile of the unknown killer, whom they predicted to be a white male in his late 20s or early 30s who worked in a menial profession and who presented a rough exterior in part to his self-hatred regarding his sexual attraction to other males. The individual would project a macho image and seek the company and approval of other masculine males in order to feel a sense of belonging. And as such, this individual would frequent redneck bars, quote unquote, and be something of a night owl, yet live on the edge of homosexual panic, always fearful of being labeled by others. Due to this fear, this offender may express a hatred of homosexuals in order to mask his own sexual attraction to those from whom he sought acceptance.
There it is.
Furthermore, the FBI predicted that upon completion of a murder, the offender would symbolically erase the act by making a rudimentary effort to cover his victim with leaves or soil, and that this individual likely had a middle-aged, middle-class, and markedly more intelligent accomplice in several of his initial homicides. Now, see, that didn't occur to me, but maybe that's what was happening with that teacher. On September 30th, Eyler was arrested in Lowell, Indiana for a routine traffic violation. He had been in the company of a young hitchhiker at the time of his apprehension, and both men were arrested and detained for questioning at a Lowell State Police Post, with Eyler initially being detained upon charges of soliciting a young male for sexual purposes after a sergeant named William Cothran, without Eyler's consent, and before informing him he was under arrest, had searched his Ford F-Series pickup at the roadside and discovered 2 sections of nylon rope. His vehicle was impounded. Following the lengthy evidentiary hearing in December of 1983, Lake County Circuit Judge William Block ruled that although Eyler's initial arrest for the traffic violation had been legally valid, his subsequent detainment, during which evidence was recovered by Indiana police and now presented before him, had been obtained without probable cause. A Sergeant John Pavlakovich conceded the primary reason Lowell police had prolonged Eyler's detainment on September 30th was to await the arrival of members of the task force assembled to investigate the series of murders, and that Eyler had never formally been under arrest in relation to any offense other than soliciting a male for sexual purposes. Further testimony pertaining to the Lake County and Chicago officers' search of Dobrovolsky's residence on October 3rd revealed this search had been conducted without a warrant. Oh boy, so mistakes were made.
Yes.
Block further ruled the facts detailed in the police affidavit to search Robert Little's home were insufficient to obtain a search warrant. With the exception of the tire impressions and hair and blood samples obtained from Eyler, Block ordered all evidence obtained to be suppressed. Block also reduced Eyler's bond sum to $10,000 from $1 million.
So even if you know that the guy is guilty and did it. If you don't do the steps in order as they should, no good.
So as a result of this ruling, Eyler was freed from custody on February 6, 1984. His family and Robert Little having paid the reduced bond fee. Terms imposed upon Eyler's bond stipulated he was unable to leave Illinois. In attempts to appeal this ruling, prosecutors submitted several legal challenges, including an appeal against the suppression of the evidence to the Supreme Court of the United States. These appeals were unsuccessful. 4 weeks after his release from custody, Eyler permanently relocated to Chicago, moving to an apartment complex in Rogers Park, with Robert Little purchasing the furniture within the property and paying the weekly rent and purchasing a new set of tires for his truck.
And there was never anything between these two, right? So they say.
That's what they say.
Okay.
At his lawyer's request, Eyler refused to provide John Dobrovolsky with his new address, although his lover soon discovered where he lived. So now this was February of 84. So now we have the case of the murder of Daniel Bridges. At approximately 10:30 p.m. on August 19th, 1984, Eyler lured 16-year-old uptown youth named Daniel Bridges to his apartment. The youngest of 13 children, Bridges was a neglected child and habitual runaway who, although heterosexual, had been a male prostitute since the age of 12. Bridges had been a close acquaintance of victim Irvin Gibson and is known to have been wary of Eyler, whom he had described to an NBC reporter who was commissioned to film a documentary focusing on child exploitation in America 2 months before his murder. He told this reporter he referred to Eyler as a real freak who was well known to the male prostitutes of Uptown. Inside Eyler's apartment, the youth was bound to a chair with clothesline before he was beaten, tortured, and then stabbed to death. Eyler then dismembered Bridges' body in his bathroom. His body was cut into 8 pieces, each of which was completely drained of blood before being placed inside 6 separate plastic bags. The dismembered body of Daniel Bridges was discovered by a janitor on the morning of August 21st, 1984. His remains had been placed inside a garbage dumpster close to Eyler's apartment and within a unit not intended for usage by tenants with Eyler's apartment complex. Believing the bags to have been illegally dumped, the janitor chose to remove the bags from the garbage to inspect the contents. Removing the first bag from the disposal unit caused the bag to split open and revealed the contents to be a severed human leg.
That's a bad day.
Now, I showed you that picture of him when he first got arrested. Now right. Look at him after he's committed all these different murders. He almost looks like a different person.
Yep.
He looks darker. Like when I say darker, like a darkness is over him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can now you can see it on him.
Dead eyes.
Like an aura.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So now it's his second arrest. Reporting this discovery to police, the janitor stated that other janitors had observed a tenant named Larry Eyler placing the bags in the dumpster the previous afternoon. Recognizing Eyler's name, a police captain informed the 4 other officers present to detain anyone occupying apartment 106, I don't care who it is. Within minutes, Eyler was arrested within his apartment. Dobrovolsky was also taken into custody, although he was soon released without charge. So it didn't say, but he must have been there.
Mm-hmm.
A forensic examination of Eyler's apartment conducted on August 21st and 22nd revealed copious quantities of blood had recently been cleaned from his bedroom, which had recently been repainted, although extensive traces of blood splattering were located across the floor, walls, and ceiling. Numerous traces of blood later determined to belong to Daniel Bridges was also discovered upon a mattress, the seat of a chair, a leather belt, a sofa within his room, and beneath the floorboards of the doorway to the bathroom.
Damn.
Inside Eyler's closet, investigators discovered the decedent's jeans saturated with rivulets of bloodstains. Bridges' distinct Duke University t-shirt, also extensively bloodstained, was discovered in a hamper along with a leather vest belonging to Eyler that had recently been washed. Moreover, investigators discovered a hacksaw on the property. Blades for this tool plus an awl were also recovered from a drawer within the utility room. Receipts recovered from the property revealed Eyler had purchased several hacksaw blades. The forensic examination of the bags used to conceal Bridges' remains revealed several fingerprints determined to belong to Eyler. These fingerprints were discovered on both the internal and external surfaces of the bags. On August 24th, investigators conducted a luminol test inside Eyler's now empty apartment. This test revealed extensive traces of blood in the bedroom. Further markings across the floors indicated Bridges' body had been dragged from the bedroom into the bathtub, where the teenager's body had evidently been dismembered. Eyler was found guilty of the aggravated kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and murder of Daniel Bridges, in addition to the concealment of the teenager's body. His face displayed little emotion as the verdict was announced, although his hands clenched the legs of the attorneys sitting on either side of him. So 2 more years later, in 1988, Eyler filed an appeal against his conviction, contending that although he had dismembered the body and disposed of the remains, that the actual murder had been committed by Robert Little in his absence. So he was trying to throw the teacher under the bus.
Yep. This guy that's
I gotta think there was something there.
Through, paid for so much for him and helped him out so much.
I gotta think there was something there.
Yeah, you're right.
The appeal was heard on May 10th, 1989, but later dismissed on October 25th. So Eyler agreed to confess and testify against the alleged accomplice on the condition he be given a fixed term of imprisonment as opposed to a further death sentence. They actually accepted it. That had some twists in there.
Yeah, that whole little connection there, it just started out as maybe sort of just a fatherly figure or an elderly uncle figure, and now it's
I had no idea that was going to come up.
Way more.
I had no idea that was going to come up.
Mm-hmm.
They just said he lived with the dude. The dude took care of him.
And
I could kind of see it being where it's like the guy's insecure. He's older. He's got the crush on the younger guy, but he doesn't want to put him out because he's not putting out. So he doesn't want to be a dick. So I'll let him stay with me.
Right.
But it's way more than that.
Yeah.
It's twisted.
And he said hints of that along the way. He starts paying for all this stuff and going out of his way.
And he said the ritual it was too fast.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense when you add up. Things add up. Like the different stages before he would kill him, the number of stabs, the lashings, the tying them up and all that. It's just, gosh, such a compelling argument to say that it's probably some truth in there.
Oh, yeah.
About the teacher.
I would say so.
A little grain of truth.
We were already getting glimpses of that picture well before that.
Well, this one's for the victims right here. I'm going to tip one up for them. You can judge whether or not you think somebody lives right or wrong, but nobody deserves to be tortured and cut up and stabbed till things are coming out of your body.
Yeah.
Nobody deserves that. On that note, we're going to end this episode, but our finale episode is coming up next, and it's going to talk about something a little different, a little lighter, I hope. Something that I didn't realize was such a big thing with people. And you brought up the idea in a previous episode we were talking about last meals because the last meal came up.
Sure.
And we're like, what are the top last meals, or what were some of these famous serial killers' last meals? So I'm going to have a big list for you next time. And we're going to go over that as our season finale comes to a close. And we move on to bigger and better things that we'll announce in the next episode. The finale season 4 episode will make a good announcement about the future of Fight the Fear podcast and cool things coming up.
Sounds
in
great.
2025. So thanks for listening. Go put a thumbs up on this. Go check out the video on YouTube. Put a thumbs up on it. Share it with your friends and family. Tell everybody we're coming out with this amazing and great piece of entertainment. We are going to obviously spin away from serial killers and talk about other things as they come, and maybe it'll be a little more random. It won't be like a successive series. I was doing like seasons of a particular subject. It'll just be kind of an intertwined theme throughout the rest of the year of next year anyway.
Yeah.
And I just want everybody to be there with us.
Absolutely.
YouTube.com/@FightTheFearPodcast, patreon.com/fightthefearpodcast. And let's have some fun. Let's lighten the mood. And
all right. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you guys next time. I don't want to hit the wrong. Yeah. I got going in the middle. I'm like, is this going to end?
Bullshit. Bullshit.
What?
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.